What would you do if a violent mob came and took your children, your spouse, and your stuff? What would you do? And furthermore, let's say all of your friends wanted to blame you for it. How would you respond? So that would be horrible. Well, that happened to David. The Amalekites came, they looted all their stuff, took their wives, their children, and the men blamed David. They wanted to stone him. They were in so much grief. And in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6, Samuel says that David got alone and he sought the Lord. He encouraged himself in the Lord. The word is encouraged himself in the Lord. David wrote a bunch of Psalms for us. Psalm 61, 62, and 63 that help us to have a window into what it means to have a true, authentic, spiritual life with God that helps us deal with all of the pain and the pressure, the trials, the disappointments, to help us to see what it looks like to put God first in the center of our distress, in the center of our pain, and in the midst of our difficulties. I know myself, I recently lost one of my sons, 9 years old. He was in a tragic accident. Yesterday we celebrated his birthday, and it was a pretty tragic time. There's a lot of pain in life. There's a lot of difficulties in life. There's a lot of trials in life. And that is why it is so important that we practice the spiritual rest and renewal that we find promised to those who will be still before God. We're going to start with Psalm 63 and open up with that one, because Psalm 63 kind of sets the context. O God, you are my God. Early will I seek you in a dry and weary land where there is no water. I have the privilege of living here in the Southwest desert in Phoenix. And I love to go out and look at the dry and weary land where there's not a lot of water, because it reminds me of God's sustaining grace, that God sustains all of these plants, all of this ecosystem in the desert with deep roots. So it is with God. Oh God, because your love is better than life, my lips will praise you. That's Psalm 63. In Psalm 62, we see how one keeps this perspective. And in Psalm 62, we see that David practiced the presence of silence before God in his life. Now again, when I say be still, be silent before God, and make this a regular practice of your life, people say, I don't have time for that. I couldn't do that. Let me read what David wrote in Psalm 62. Truly, my soul waits for God. From him comes my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. See, we don't want to be moved. We want to have someone to defend us. We want to have someone to protect us. We get worried and anxious about the mobs and the violence and the problems and the financial concerns and the difficulty and the marriage and the kids and all these things. But what keeps us from being moved is to be still before God. Jesus taught his disciples to come away to a deserted place. Jesus got away from the hustle and bustle of his ministry and prayed before his Father. It is the secret, still, quiet processing of our thoughts and feelings and emotions before God that is the key to unleashing the blessing and the power and the presence of God in our life. Psalm 62 presents a scenario that is not without difficulties. Verses 2 and 3 and 4. This psalmist was in trouble. Sometimes you get in trouble. I know I get in trouble. With 11 kids and been a pastor for 17 years, seen a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty, and a lot of trial. That's why my soul needs to wait silently for God alone. Psalm 62, verse 5. My soul waits silently for God alone, for my expectation is from him. It is only in the stillness and the silence. And the Hebrew word for silence means silent, still, without movement. To practice this stillness and silence before God so God, through His Spirit, can work in my spirit and teach me to set my hope in God alone, for my expectation is from Him. It's all in Psalm 62. You see, my soul will set its hope in all kinds of things. It'll set its hope in wanting to get out of the pain and the pressure, and in wanting my will to be done, not God's will, in wanting my solution, not God's solution. So in the stillness, in the silence of my prayer before God, God illumines all of the other things that I set my heart on. And He teaches me to be still before Him alone. That's the value of being silent before God. Psalm 61 simply says, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. So when my heart is overwhelmed, I go to God. When my heart is overwhelmed with the pain or the pleasure, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. I would encourage you to come alone before God. Every morning, every evening, or any time in between, to practice silence before God. As you read the Scriptures, as you pray, and as you meditate, don't forget this most important practice, to be still before God, so that God can set your expectation on God alone. He is your rock. He is your defense. In times of great spiritual distress, you need to practice spiritual rest. I know I do, and I know that you'll be blessed as you seek God and God alone, in quietness and in stillness.